Happy holidays, silly geese, quackers! Last month we ran a poll to figure out what the next video should be, and somehow Gale squeaked out a win. But because we are mostly focusing on the Hunger Games, the first book at the moment, we're not going to get to Gale as the Prim Reaper just yet. Don't worry, we will get there. We're just saving it for Mockingjay. Instead, we're going to focus today on pre-war Gale. And a take that I've seen going around about that version of Gale is that his relationship to Katniss is transactional. And yes, it absolutely is. Their relationship is mutually transactional. What's interesting is that somehow this descriptor of transactional has become a moral judgment. Because the real question isn't really whether or not Gale's feelings for Katniss are valid. It's why we treat certain kinds of love as morally superior in the first place, and what kinds of care we quietly devalue while surviving is still the main problem at hand. So let's define what transactional really means, and then we'll use the history of Maslow's hierarchy of needs to understand how we have come to value love and care in a world where many of us are just trying to stay alive. Let's get into it. Definition break. Transactional. When people say that Gale's feelings for Katniss are transactional, what they usually mean is that their relationship is rooted in shared knowledge. As the seasons went by, we grudgingly began to share our knowledge, our weapons, our secret places that were thick with wild plums or turkeys. Shared labor. As soon as school ended, Gale and I hit the woods because I wanted to get enough to trade for a present for Prim. Shared risk. I could be shot on a daily basis for hunting. Gale and I agree that if we have to choose between dying of hunger and a bullet in the head, the bullet would be much quicker. Shared responsibility. Then one day, without either of us saying it, we became a team, dividing the work and the spoils, making sure that both our families had food. In other words, their relationship was built around food, protection, and survival. Katniss literally tells us that. Gale and I were thrown together by a mutual need to survive. And sure, it's not a pearl on a beach in a death games, but it is a relationship formed through survival. But it doesn't mean that the relationship is inherently manipulative or fake, or that there's no love involved. Often it just means that the relationship developed when survival was the primary concern, which brings us to Maslow. Theory break. Maslow's hierarchy. Most of us have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you've probably seen this pyramid. But that pyramid actually has nothing to do with Maslow himself. It came later, but we'll get to that. Abraham Maslow proposed this theory in 1943 in A Theory of Human Motivation to explain what drives human behavior in different conditions. Not to rank people or determine someone's worth or maturity. The core idea is pretty simple. People are shaped by the pressure of their unmet needs. When food, safety, and stability are uncertain, a person's behavior and attention narrows to getting those needs met. People focus on what they need to stay alive, just like any animal. And when a need eases, people can gain more bandwidth to focus on other things like connection, creativity, meaning, and self-expression. Crucially, Maslow wasn't placing people on a hierarchy. He was describing which needs dominate attention when they go unmet. This distinction matters because Gale isn't being judged for his feelings for Katniss. He's being judged for what his circumstances allowed him to prioritize. But let's stick a pin in that. First, let's look at why this is being moralized at all. How a descriptive model turned into a moral one. In the 1940s and 50s, Maslow's hierarchy of needs was taken up by management theorists, most notably Douglas McGregor. In this new management context, the hierarchy was reframed as something you move through. The man whose lower level needs are satisfied is not motivated to satisfy those needs. For practical purposes, they exist no longer. What Maslow actually argues is that when a person has a need be consistently met, their attention turns to other things. It's not that that need goes away, it's that it's deprioritized. Anyway, graphics were developed to help model this version of Maslow's hierarchy, originally with this staircase looking graphic, and then eventually to this pyramid that we all know and love. The pyramid appeared in 1960 in an article called How Money Motivates Men by Charles McDermott. In that article, McDermott encourages managers to use Maslow's hierarchy to assess their lower level workers to determine where they are on the hierarchy of needs and to adjust their pay and benefits accordingly. This also led to the conclusion that people whose basic needs are not met are less capable of higher level motivation and reasoning at work, which is obviously a problem. This shift has had serious consequences, not just for management, but pop psychology too. Instead of recognizing Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a way to understand the way that our needs influence our behavior, it started being used to judge personal limitations. And that's how a motivational model became a moral judgment. Woohoo. Why this matters for Gale. Once we start seeing survival-based behavior as somehow morally inferior, we start to see problems, thoughts that emerge. Love based on practical care and labor-based attachment is often interpreted as someone using someone else. And that's sort of how people seem to see Gale. Gale does not live in a world where survival is just background noise. It is constant and daily and shared. He and Katniss hunt, they feed both of their families, and they take lethal risk on a daily basis. So when Gale relates to Katniss, it's not just a boy who likes a girl and has an emotional attachment. So when Gale relates to Katniss, it's not just emotional, it's also material. Losing Katniss would also mean losing food and losing safety and losing companionship. And looking at love that way isn't cold. That's just what attachment looks like when care also means having to feed people. Katniss makes it clear that even with both of them hunting every day, it's tight. With both of us hunting daily, there are still nights when game has to be swapped for lard or shoelaces or wool. Still nights when we go to bed with our stomachs growling. So yes, Gale's care shows up as labor and protection, and no, that's not a lack of feeling. It's an understanding that feeling alone doesn't keep people alive. A note on Peeta, bandwidth, and self-sacrifice. At this point, it's time to bring Peeta into the conversation, because he's who we tend to measure Gale against. And yeah, Peeta's love looks pretty different. And that difference doesn't come from moral superiority, it comes from a difference in circumstance. Unlike Gale and Katniss, Peeta has pretty consistently had his physiological needs met. Survival wasn't really a daily negotiation. He could count on there being food, even if it was just stale bread. And that difference matters. Because when your basic needs are met, you have more bandwidth to think about connection, meaning, and emotional expression. It means that Peeta has the choice to resist being a piece in the Capitol's games. Gale and Katniss do not have that luxury. Their family's survival depends on their survival. Peeta actually makes this point in Catching Fire. Your family needs you, Katniss, Peeta says. No one really needs me, he says, and there's no self-pity in his voice. It's true his family doesn't need him. So when we praise Peeta for being self-sacrificial and we condemn Gale for being transactional, what we're really doing is we're confusing a difference in primary needs with a difference in moral worth. And that's not fair. Frankly, it's an elitist way to rank love. And we don't just make this mistake in fandom. Why this matters. Care versus survival. This is where the conversation is going to get a little uncomfortable. When we apply a moral standard that love only counts if it's self-sacrificial, we do serious harm. In the real world too. We can see it in how we talk about certain kinds of labor in real life. Let's start with teachers. Teachers in the US often barely make enough to make ends meet, sometimes needing a second or third or more jobs. They have to make a choice between a passion for supporting children and living comfortably. Then, when teachers prioritize their own health or safety or financial needs and leave the field, people condemn them for not caring enough about the children. And the same is true for healthcare. We expect healthcare workers to absorb a lot of abuse, physical and verbal, because they're supposed to love what they do. They're supposed to care about the patients. In both of those cases, we only seem to respect the care that they're giving if it's self-sacrificial. When teachers or healthcare workers acknowledge that their positions are jobs, what they need to earn money so they can survive, people often react as though their dedication and service is no longer valid, because you're just in it for the money, okay? Somehow, when we see it as transactional, we feel entitled to condemn it, but making decisions about who and what you can love under survival pressure isn't immoral. Treating self-sacrifice as the only valid proof of care is a luxury belief, and it's one you can only really hold from a position of privilege. Back to the take. Is Gale's love transactional? Yes. But that doesn't make it less valid. And it might be uncomfortable to admit, but many of us don't choose our jobs or our partners based solely on pure love. Survival is often a factor. Whether it's romantic love or professional passion, we often have to make a choice between this is what I have to give and this is what I need to survive. And that makes sense given Maslow's version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that's why this thinking that sacrifice is the measure of love. We see that same perspective supported almost everywhere around us. The ones that tell teachers that they need to sacrifice their sanity and their well-being and their financial stability for their students. And that tell healthcare workers that their care really only matters if they're willing to endure harm. And the ones that treat survival-based decisions as moral failures rather than structural realities. When we applaud self-sacrifice and dismiss reciprocal care, we're not just misreading Gale. We're upholding a system that only respects love when it erases the person giving it. But what do I know? I'm just a silly goose. Quackers?